the majority of them were gaining independence. Many of them, were trained abroad and then continue to be trained abroad. Many of them continue to be in these international institutions, but when they go in there, as a result of the connections or the funding being received also from other and then big countries, Clarissa, you understand that in addition to the technical skills that what these students may learn, or these trained diplomats what may acquire from those schools or institutions abroad, they are also being ingrained with a dose of ideology, and it is clear in what we have seen during the period of the Cold War and what we continue to see. When I got onto this show today, later I heard one of the panelists talking about the connection with the what we call the francophone, and even at the diplomatic level, as long as we continue to see this divide. The second example I want to give you is what we saw in 2012 for the chairmanship of the African Union. We know that our mother and sister from South Africa, Dlamini Zuma, won before the former Prime Minister of Gabon, Jean Ping. But at that time, when the two of them were campaigning, we saw to Africa. Talking about, a francophone Africa against an anglophone Africa. This language itself at the diplomatic level is, I will say, very divisive, and it is a language that also sprung out of the period of colonization. That's the second example I want to take. And of course, we're resting on the third example. We have seen, and we continue to see how countries such as France can take the lead at the United Nations within the Security Council when it comes to drafting, proposing resolutions for the resolution of conflicts in certain countries. We saw that, blatantly in 2011 in the case of Côte d'Ivoire, when the Security Council resolution was actually instrumented by France, which again, led to the intervention of the French troops in this country. This kind of diplomatic efforts definitely contributed to stalling whatever diplomacy came out of Africa in terms of conflict resolution and in terms of any other project of development. Recently, we also saw another example of how the ECOWAS position with regard to the countries of the Sahel was clearly dictated by the European Union and the French government. So, is all that and all those examples of the residual of I say left out or hangovers of colonization? My answer to that question definitely is yes. And Clarissa, I want to yell on that.
Dr. Eddie, and now we are conversant of this crisis, probably the dilemmas, and I think some pundits actually highlighted some sort of rhetorical diplomacy being at play in Libya that led even to the downfall of Muammar Gaddafi, and also the situation, the 2010 situation in Côte d'Ivoire that probably ended the Gbagbo regime to Alassane Ouattara. Now, there is that renaissance, Dr. Eddie, across Africa, and the wind of change blowing. How can we now make things to be more probably practically, institutionally under the banner of the African Union to ensure that Africa probably gets to the international stage under one voice or with one voice, like the case with the European Union and other maybe globes or clubs bargaining at the international level?
Understanding that diplomacy, and I will talk about what the global stage or the continental level, but again we're understanding that diplomacy is filled with tools that countries to start with or regional economic communities use to assert their interests, seek for their interests and fulfill those interests in the global arena. I will offer that we need to start with those countries themselves. If we talk about the African Union, there is an African Union because we have African countries.
Absolutely.
And I'm sure that what the panelists who spoke before me emphasize that. Where are we in terms of those countries themselves? A few examples. When you have, I don't know how many African countries do have diplomatic missions that cover a wide range or a bigger, a broader breadth of countries. At the United Nations, we see that what we have about 193 countries, and I don't have the stats in front of me to find out whether or even the superpowers do have representation everywhere. One thing is sure is that diplomacy is expensive. It costs a lot of money.
Absolutely.
But at the same time, Clarisse, the African countries need to be very conscious that it is also a space, an arena where investment needs to be made. As a people living in the diaspora, and I have lived in the United States for the past 20 years, I have experienced some of the difficulties that the Ivory Coast Embassy in the United States in Washington, D.C. may have. Sometimes it is in terms of staffing, sometimes it is also in terms of the skills of these individuals, or sometimes it is also in terms of how thinly stretched the personnel on the embassy can be. You have diplomatic missions that have the mission to cover a broader range of missions, including representing their countries in the country where they are hosted. This is one of the issues. And these are the things that what African countries need to start. Second thing is the training or the technical capacity, the knowledge of these diplomats that we have. Who trained them? Where are they trained? What are the philosophy, the ideology that they have? Of course, an ambassador is the reflection of the country or the government that sits in there.
Sure.
If the government, of course, is aligning, or the president is aligning with, let's say, France-Afrique, you're not going to expect an ambassador to go upwards or to go left or right. If not, that ambassador, a female or a male, will run the risk of being sacked, point blank. Which means that we also need to have in place in Africa some leaders whose policy, programs of development starts with Africa, continues with Africa, and ends with Africa. Meaning, it does not it does not include any form of autocracy. It does not include any form of living in autarky, no. But it means that whatever relationships are developed, whatever trade patterns are developed, or trade relations that are developed, those should be done for the sake of the development of the African continent. So this is at the country level. Once all those things, I believe, are also in place, it will automatically trigger at the continental level. And before we even reach the continental level, I'm sure that it's also going to strengthen the different regional economic communities that we have, starting with the ECOWAS, the SADC, the EECA, and all of them are going to be strengthened because the countries themselves would have strengthened their governance mechanism and their also diplomatic goals, which will trigger, again, strengthening these regional economic communities, which will in turn also strengthen whatever the African Union is doing. Clarisse, this is the path that I am describing, or the path that I'm drafting, proposing for Africa to strengthen its role, its presence in this global diplomatic arena. And of course, in doing that, I think that the African countries today have another opportunity to truly prioritize multilateralism because of the weaknesses that what we see at the economic level, at many other level with the question of instabilities and all that. Multilateralism is the way to go, and I believe that there is a chance there also for the African countries to strengthen their diplomatic tools, their foreign policies, which again in turn will help the continent at large to assert more of its presence. The African Union will become a powerful tool if we continue, of course, on that path.
Absolutely, becoming a strategic and powerful tool internally will actually make the scope larger for Africa, And while listening to you, Dr. Eddie, I was thinking of how can Africa navigate this. Now, the question will be with you, Yulia Berg. Can public diplomacy for the African continent help to, define its position, or probably not define, but impose its position at the international level to change perspectives, what people think about Africa? We have seen instances lately of some sort of embarrassing scenes pertaining the President of the United States of America and African leaders. We saw that with Cyril Ramaphosa of South Africa. We saw that with these other African countries or presidents that visited the White House lately, including Liberia, Gabon, Senegal, and what have you. So, what is the place of public diplomacy for Africa? And Russia being one country that has shown interest lately in Africa with promises of helping the continent navigate these complex diplomatic times. How can we probably make it more feasible for the benefits of the African continent? Hello, Yulia.
Clarissa, if we may, for an individual like me who again consider himself an immigrant from Africa living here in the United States, I believe that when we talk about public diplomacy, we are coming to a certain lower level, living of course governmental arenas, institutions, and looking at what on a daily basis, right? Sometimes individuals can do as well. One example that I will give is that here I have seen, I know of, and what we are hearing, first of all, in our midst is that the recent agreement that was a peace agreement between Rwanda and the Democratic Republic of Congo that was brokered by the White House may have been, right, and this is what we are hearing, the result of works by the Congolese diaspora, okay, approaching this superpower and these two countries that have, a vested interest in the Democratic Republic of Congo at the time when we're talking about, the importance of critical minerals and critical materials. Second example that I have seen people in the diaspora, whether it is in Europe or whether it is in the United States, we're also doing, is this whole thing about immigrant communities of forming organizations, right, and approaching lawmakers. It can be either at the what you call it, the Department of State. It can be at the U.S. Congress. Even within the different states where they live, how they have approached their state representatives, for instance. All of those things, I think, work. All of those things can actually pay off in terms of presenting to the public, presenting to populations that elect leaders. The said leaders formulate the foreign policies of their country that sometimes contradict and suppress Africa's diplomacy. It is important that these people know or have another version of what is going. That's when people, teachers, professors from Africa who are operating in institutions of higher education in their host countries become also very important. Clary, these are the few examples that I want to give in here and say that the African continent or Africa is definitely at a crossroad today. I have said countless times in your shows that, I am one of those people who remain very stupidly and awkwardly, that's the way I call myself, optimistic when it comes to what Africa will become tomorrow. This optimism does not exclude the fact that we have to scrutinize and be very critical on some of the things that do not work. But I hope and I know when I see young people today in the streets, when I see people with like-minded people thinking of what Africa should be when it is not, I believe that but we still have those human resources to take us to where we want to go. So yes, I believe that public diplomacy, as well as many other tools, are very important for Africa to strengthen its diplomacy, or the African country to strengthen their diplomacy, and of course, become a better player, more visible, more assertive in the global arena.
Capital, which you just highlighted, Dr. Eddie, needs the right mind frame. I would love us to reiterate on this aspect with you, ARNAUD DEVELAY, of public diplomacy for Africa, especially in the place of public diplomacy in Africa and its position at the United Nations Security Council.
Yes, well, I think it's something that what Dr. Adi somewhat alluded to is mostly for African to answer. Suffice it to say that public diplomacy works hand in hand with diplomacy per se. It can be somehow a intensifier, an amplificator, to the extent there is coordination between some of the missions and some of the diasporas, notwithstanding how they are organized within specific groups in the countries, the respective countries. But yes, public diplomacy is owing, especially today with the platforms, social media, is an indispensable, if not central element, because there's the purely diplomatic process, which is somewhat dry and dangerous and does not interest much, and then the public diplomacy allows vulgarization of some of the items on the agenda to be disseminated far and wide in such a way that people can understand, if anything, subliminally what's being attempted and where we're going here. So yes, public diplomacy is part and parcel, not just for Africa, but for any country or groupings of country that understands what it means today to communicate on issues of global reach in the international arena and in a way that meets as large an impact with the audience as can be.
Thank you so much. I don't know if Dr. Elijah ENOAKU is back. I would love to continue the conversation with him while noting, ladies and gentlemen, that you are welcome to this information and knowledge sharing program, a platform where we get to engage into deep and strategic analysis to be able to widen the horizon, particularly of stakeholders in Africa, to see how and the world at large, to see how they can navigate the new, maybe the complex new world order that is taking a central stage today. And we continue to look at what is available, the factors that will shape Africa practically, Africa's position at the probably international arena. We were talking about the economic diplomacy as well, and I think I would love that you elaborate more on that, Dr. Elijah ENOAKU. In May, we had African leaders sitting for a debt conference and looking at some of these constraints that the continent is facing today as a result of debt. You've always been very critical about the role of the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, and even private creditors, how this is overwhelming the continent Africa. And we think to an extent it is some sort of another style of diplomacy to control Africa at a very core factor, which is the economy. So how can we explain about this, maybe the way forward towards reducing the debt level, and which is overwhelming African countries today? You may want to answer the question, Priestley, EKANE. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Economic discourse is not really my stronghold, but then I would give it a try.
Sorry.
Yeah, I think in that perspective, the idea, the central idea, I think Ghana is already doing that kind of thing where they're asking, or where they're rejecting debt restructuring terms. The problem in itself is not engaging in debt processes, because even countries like the United States or European countries are heavily indebted compared to most African countries. Most of these Western countries are heavily indebted, but now within these organizations that are granting these loans and granting these huge amounts of money, I think the big problem is to be able to define the terms of these debts, and that's the that was a consequence, for example, of the SAPs, the structural adjustments programs, where they came the Bretton Woods institutions. They came, they offered you money, and then they told you what to do. They told you the conditions, or they told you how to use that money. And sometimes these loans were not tailored to our needs. So that's the problem here. That's the problem Africa is facing today. That whether we are contracting loans from China, from the EU, from the United States, we should be able to know the terms of this loan, the percentage payback, and the conditions for the loan the loans we're engaging on. Is because, like with the structural adjustment programs, what they usually did was they would grant you a loan, let's say $30 million, but you see that the contracting companies for the structures you would want to build, the contracting companies were mostly from the West. The employees, for example, in these structures or in these programs that we had to put in place, were mostly coming from the West. And we still have it today in most of our African countries, that we have companies, for example, you get a loan from Exim Bank China, then you realize that the contracting bodies are Chinese companies who bring employees from China and who invest on lands that are borrowed. I mean, it's sometimes very disturbing. So the idea is not in contracting loans. The idea is about the restructuring terms of these loans. I think that's where the crux of the matter is. And once we are able, and that's why I would join Dr. Eddy when he said most of Africa should be mostly engaged. I think, and basically most regional bodies are doing it, engaged in multilateral diplomacy, because today in the 21st century, there's hardly any nation who can claim to engage in a certain unilateralism, because even President Trump, who is claiming, who is propagating the notion of MAGA, America cannot stand on its own. America is heavily indebted, and it's only on this diplomatic fora or in diplomatic platforms that you can engage a certain voice. And that's why whether ECOWAS, whether CEMAC, or the African Union, we should be able to have an economic plan. We should be able to have a diplomatic setup, able enough, strong enough to engage, to be Africa's voice on these international platforms. I think that's how I'll approach the question. I'm sorry that the economy is not really my stronghold. I think another person could do better than me.
I think Dr. Eddie, you want to throw more light on it because it's quite important that we look at it being, some sort of a tool that has been used to probably frustrate the African continent from making these numerous strides, which we just highlighted earlier on regarding its diplomatic standing.
Thank you, Clarice. When you asked the question, I started laughing because, I turned quickly to my bookshelves in here to find this book, right? Not that I'm promoting it. Yeah. I don't get any money out of it. But, this book, 50 years is enough. The case against the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund, where you have, different authors, including, the founder of the Grameen Bank, Mohammed Yunus, wrote pieces in there. The question about debt is very, very important for the African countries. We remember already that, the outset of the independence period, Julius Nyerere of Tanzania raised the flag and warned the African countries, the emerging, African countries and independent African countries, about being indebted, right? It is clear, it is simple, right? The more indebted you are, the less, but you are able to speak or say something. And then we have seen there is no need to go with a countless demonstration to prove that heavy debt has slowed down, Africa, political growth, economic growth, and social and even the cultural growth in India. So the question of the debt is important. If a few years ago there was the Jubilee movement, we remember that the push for the cancellation, right, of these debts, it was also a diplomatic effort being pushed in there, for instance. You understand? So why multilateralism becomes very important in here? It is because it allows the African country to diversify, right, their sources in terms of wherever they borrow, what capitals for development projects here and there. It is very important. Maybe by having these access to different, plenty other banks, it will minimize to a certain extent the heavy reliance on these institutions, the Bretton Woods institution, which may also result in accumulating much more resources that will be put into development. Another thing is, again, we talked about fiscal austerity, how money is being spent. As we talked about that, we should also not cast a blind eye, if I may speak like that, on kleptocracy, illicit financial flows, and the bigger cap of corruption. That's where we come back to, I propose to come back to what I said earlier. If the African countries, if the African Union, if the regional economic communities can have to become strong elements to assert Africa's diplomacy at the global level, individually, the countries themselves have to put their houses in order. Because the countries, again, the strength of the regional economic community, the strength of the African Union, and the strength of any other inter-African agency is predicated on the political, economic strength of the African countries themselves. Therefore, when it comes to the issue of debts, when it comes to the issue of resources, where do we borrow and what do we use what we borrow to do?
Absolutely.
Do we exactly borrow what we said we went there to borrow? Gross example will be how COVID-19 funds were managed in the respective African countries, starting with Cameroon, for instance.
Sure.
Simple as that. Why is it that, we have a project that can cost this, then you have a government that tells you that, actually it costs that amount of money.
And
there are so many.
Not realized.
There you go, right? Or you have governments that send their ministers to go borrow money to develop national ID cards, for instance. And after that, 10 years after, the system is still not fixed. Where did the money go? And it ended, as we said in Senegal, the new government comes in and find out that there's a batch of loans that the previous government took that was not declared publicly. Where did the money go? So all of those things, again, contribute to weakening Africans' diplomacy. People ask that. And therefore, the question of debt is important, and I believe that there are multiple ways we can actually, or the African countries can work to reduce their reliance on debts, and even making sure that whatever they borrow is truly put to what they went in there to borrow the money for.
Quite very important, and I think it is important or imperative to identify those loopholes coming from the African continent. And with you, ARNAUD, we want to stress more on this by analyzing how the principle of transparency and accountability within the African continent is affecting its diplomacy, especially when it comes to diplomacy at the international level within blocs and within institutions, because you cannot live as a continent or an entity with a very background that is not clear, pertaining transparency and accountability, and you probably want the United Nations Security Council maybe to listen to you, maybe the BRICS to take you serious, or any other multilateral institutions wanting to engage intentionally and strategically with Africa that is seeing a new, some sort of diplomatic conquest.
Yes, well, Dr. Eddy actually put the finger where it hurts, but it has to be said, obviously. And but to be sure, corruption is an endemic problem, not just in Africa, but in most countries worldwide. I will only say that the Russian Federation has had to deal, notwithstanding the positive economic indicator in the last 25 years, it is a fight that the Russian Federation has waged very forcefully. And if I may actually recall, following his victory in the latest presidential elections last year, President Putin actually made a somewhat not very publicized, and even before he swore the oath of the presidency, a couple of days later, the first order of business upon the results being published was to pay a visit to the FSB Academy, where he congratulated the cadets on doing an excellent job in as far as the purview of what the agency has been known to engage into. But he particularly paid great heed for the next 6 years to focus, if that had done before, this had not been done before, more than ever before, on the issue of corruption, and to show no mercy on those issues. China has also gone through this process. We all recall reading numerous articles about the fate of the so-called Red Princes, who advocated for themselves huge sums of monies that were supposed to improve the well-being of their constituents. And again, the punishment was harsh, might seem harsh from a certain perspective, bearing on always finding excuses for law violator. But the fact is, when we look at the bigger picture, corruption can really, I would say it, amount to treason. And it's not a crime against humanity. And I'm not exaggerating here. this is something that is almost somewhat incorporated, not unlike prostitution in the PIB of some of those countries in the West, which was, as was underlined earlier by one of the co-panelists, are heavily mandated. So they're trying to somehow, inflate artificially whatever it is they're producing. But again, corruption is an endemic problem, and this is something that African countries should not fear to be criticized about insofar as enforcement is concerned. Maybe drafting new legislation to that effect, but it is part and parcel, part of what we're talking about today. This perceived impediment for Africa to make itself heard in global fora. If the idea is to be, convincing potential lenders or investors that Africa is the place to invest into, this issue of corruption and legal security for the investors have to be addressed, and to the extent they are being addressed, there has to be an enforcement mechanism with harsh penalties, so that the dissuasion effect, gets to the people where it's supposed to be going to. I would say that's all I would say on the issue.
Actually, not lovely. Corruption actually seems to be everywhere, but then when it affects the masses or the common man, it becomes very problematic. And with you, Priestley EKANE, let's still look at this, which is some sort of an impediment to Africa navigating the global scene properly and with confidence. Corruption that has eaten deep into the country or countries. Transparency and accountability that is very minimal, and then how Africa's internal politics itself has limited its scope at the international level, pertaining diplomacy. From there, we propose solutions that can even give them the more confidence to stand out there when probably they try to discuss multilateral diplomatic engagements.
Yeah, thank you. I think, like I said, I'm mostly disturbed each time Africa or the peoples of Africa engage topic on an emotional level, or they are mostly on the crying side of a story. I think there is work to do. The world is changing, and if Africa needs to ride through the boat of change, mentalities need to change. That's why I like to say that the biggest problem sometimes in Africa is not poverty, it's not corruption, it's mental side. You need to unchain the mentalities of the people, of who we are. You need to understand that when you want to talk about corruption, then you have to know that it's a systemic problem, it's a structural problem, and that societies are generally evolutive. It's continuity. I'll pursue on with what my brother Dr. Eddy said moments ago. How do you even comprehend that you are in deep crisis, in a deep health crisis, where your people are sick, where the world is facing a global crisis, COVID, and then you send a bunch of individuals, to contract loans to fight an ongoing health crisis, and then somehow these people convince themselves that they could plunder these resources or divert these resources in a country where they have family members, in a country where they have where their family members and friends use these healthcare units. It's disturbing. You cannot understand how you would contract loans probably to build a football stadium that is meant to be used by communities, by a country, that is meant to give you a clout, whether in the domain of sports or culturally. You decide to swindle this money, then there is a big problem. I think we need to start understanding that you can't be on the table of the greats. You can't be on the G20 table, on the G7 table, when you have not gone to a certain extent. Even these countries that are sitting on this table, certainly, they are also corrupt, but comparatively, I think that of Africa, on the people of Africa, is deeply rooted. And maybe it's the old guard, because it's changing too. I don't want to say that it's something that is enduring. There is I like to call it the old legion, the after independence. And so most African countries inherited these governments who from colonialism to neo-colonialism. We once experienced the latches of the colonial master, who left us these latches, and it became the latches from I call it neo-colonialism, from the new imperialist, who is the African too. So we need to change these mindsets. Know that you have to be transparent, you have to be accountable, you have to put the civil society needs to ask questions. Sure. If you're talking about Transparency International Cameroon branch, or Ivory Coast branch, or Togo branch, you need to ask questions, you need to be transparent, you need to put these figures on the table. If you're contracting a loan from Exim Bank China or from the EU, these loans should be used for the intended projects, and at the end of the day, the people need to ask questions. They need to see the palpable fallout of the loans they are contracting, because even if these loans are contracted by the government, it is taxpayers' money. Yeah, this is taxpayers' money, and wherever we are, we need to ask questions. And once we haven't solved these things that we consider little, it has a trickle-down effect from bottom to low, or from top to bottom. It has to be accounted for, and that's the only way we can also have a projecting voice on a more global stage.
Indeed, fixing the insights to be valuable at the outside, and bringing us to the role of civil society across the African continent, and even the African diaspora, in helping to bring a stronger voice, or Africa's stronger standing at the probably diplomatic standing at the international space. With you, Dr. Eddie. Hello, Dr. Eddie.
Maris, I'm sorry, I lost you a little bit. Can you please repeat the question for me?
Now we're looking at the role of the civil society, the African younger population, and even the African diaspora in reshaping Africa's diplomatic landscape. What practical probably reforms can come from within these stakeholders that will have a direct impact on the governments across the African continent?
Number one, the African diaspora has to be praised, but it also has to be under severe criticism. Praise, number one, because of the remittances. Praise because of what I said earlier. You have groups that I know of, and I am myself part of them, that have worked in the countries where they are to enhance the public diplomacy of their countries. You have members of the diaspora that have worked hand in hand with the ambassadors or the different diplomats from their countries that are in here. You have diaspora members that, for instance, in August, are going to have a friendly game in the state of Maryland, and all of those cultural activities are meant to highlight, right, or present their countries of origin under a different light, other than the usual conflict-ridden Africa or images that what we see on public and national television, either in Europe or in North America. This is the role that what the diaspora has been playing. But at the same time, also, we all know that what this diaspora has not been foreign to the kind of troubles that what we have seen in our different countries, because these diaspora members sometimes also do align either with rebel groups or with sitting governments that are actually either corrupt government because they are also reaping the benefits of either this corruption or this rebellion. So the diaspora can be praised, will be praised for the efforts, and at the same time the diaspora can also be severely criticized.
Absolutely.
Other things that I think can be done and should be done in here with regard to the diaspora. A few years ago, Clarisse, in the United States, I have witnessed the Liberian community, right, or Liberian immigrants who play a huge role in the reconstruction of their country today, with a different small project, either at the village level, at the local level, at the regional level, or the county level. They are involved in all of those things. But I have seen this Liberian diaspora campaigning year after year, years after years, to obtain dual citizenship. This is very important. This is very important, I believe. Sometimes, by way of living outside of the country for a long period of time, you understand, technically for somebody who leave their country in their 20s and stay abroad, working hard for their families because of the remittances that they send in there, and 20 years after, many of them kind of sort of, will be forced to naturalize so that they reap the benefit of their what? The investment that they made in the social security system in their countries of origin. Yeah. But at the same time, what happened in their host countries, they are no longer viewed, considered as a citizen. But at the same time, the country is expecting them to continue to contribute to the reconstruction. There is a discrepancy in there. There is a huge contradiction. And I believe that thinking of this idea of a dual citizenship can be something that has to be on the table, carefully negotiated to help in that direction. As far as the civil society is concerned in our respective countries, I have also noticed, of course not in all of the African countries, but since 2000 at least, there has been a qualitative and a quantitative growth when it comes to the civil society. Quantitative, yes, in terms you can just look at the number of African based civil society organizations that are registered today with the United Nations. The number the number has grown exponentially. But at the same time also, the civil society organizations in Africa today are not only limiting their effort to providing peace meals or providing a bag of rice in times of a disaster, right? They are also today talking more and more about civic engagement, building citizens' responsibilities. And within that civil society, we also have the trade unions, which appear to be the most powerful of the civil society organizations in our countries and probably in the rest of the world. They have to play by that game as well. You know, a while ago, when the Mbeki report came out, the Mbeki report is that report that was commissioned by the African Union and piloted by President Mbeki at the time about the amount of illicit financial flows, corruptions that maim African economies and the efforts at the development. What happened? About 50 billion identified to escape the country or the continent every year because of this corruption and these illicit financial flows or this kleptocracy. When that came out, trade unions in Africa launched a campaign that they call Stop the Bleeding campaign, to push the different African governments to pass on what? Reforms, policies, and take on a new mechanism to stop the hemorrhage in there. Those things, and this is the role that the civil society has to play. We need to build the capacity to hold our leaders accountable. This whole thing about civil society organizations should not intermingle in politics or interact in politics is actually a sham. It is a gimmick. It is a false pretense that where political leaders have used for a long period of time to exclude many people and stakeholders from intervening in the political and civic engagement arena. It is time to, it's a high time to change that. And I believe that, the more we do that, the more we will scrutinize what is happening, even smallest projects. Even smallest projects. Even smallest projects. A country that is indebted cannot go publicly to the international arena and speak. Simple as that. Even as individuals, let's bring it down to us as individuals. If you owe your neighbor money, can you go out in the public and speak loud about that, your neighbor? Or when the neighbor is talking, then you talk as well? The neighbor will simply tell you, my friend, be quiet, because it is because of me.
Absolutely.
Thanks to the little things that I give you that your family can survive. What do you call that? Insult. No, it's not an insult, it's the truth. And for us Christians, the Bible said it. The hand that gives is always on top of the one that receives. Anytime you go beg money from somebody, you will be indebted and you will be also subservient to that person you borrowed the money from. It applies to also countries as well. So, Clarisse, again, the diaspora has a role to play. I elucidated that, and the civil society organizations also do have a role to play. It is time to really reject the older discourse that says that civil society organizations should not intermingle in anything that deals with politics or should not be interacting with elected officials or public managers unless it is to go beg for something. No, we need to hold them accountable.
Absolutely.
What is your budget? How much of that budget did you receive? Where did that money go? It can be at the municipal level, at the mayoral, whatever you call it, level. It can be at the local government level, wherever it is. People need to raise their voice. But in order for them to raise their voice, there is a job to do.
Absolutely.
Clarisse, in summer, let me end on that one. In some of the African countries, you can count almost 100 political parties. The constitution in those countries said that it is the role of the political parties to contribute to what? The public, to public knowledge. Aside from motivating, mobilizing people to go to vote, what else do those political parties do? In order for voters to be educated or to be informed, they need to receive certain education. And this education has to bear on the issues, the questions of the everyday and the day-to-day lives. If there is no lights where they are, if there is no street lights, and as a result of the street light, people are dying. If there is no, trenches for water to go by when there is huge storms or whatever it is, that every year during the raining season, whether it is in Cameroon, in Côte d'Ivoire, elsewhere, people are dying. What are we doing with the lands? I'm going to end on that one, Clarisse, not to take too long on that question, but definitely the civil society organizations and the African national living in the diaspora in North America, in Europe, also have a role to play to advance our diplomacy.
And I think it is very imperative to identify all of these stakeholders who have a role, one or two, to play to reshape Africa's standing at the international arena. Let's contextualize this question with you, EKANE, looking at the place of Cameroon and how has the civil society over the years helped to reshape Cameroon's standing at the international level, and probably what's the way forward, particularly as the nation is heading towards presidential elections in October. How will these factors or stakeholders redefine Cameroon's diplomatic standing?
Thanks for your question. And it would be an easy answer for me, because I would say the civil society in Cameroon is trapped. It is very trapped because the civil society in Cameroon is well instrumentalized by the government. The civil society in Cameroon does not have a leverage when it comes to action. The civil society in Cameroon is little or not has little voice over over actions or government actions in that country. It is not a unique preserve, or it's not a unique, it's not an exclusivity of Cameroon. It happens in the other African countries as well. But since our focus is Cameroon, I think the civil society in most cases intervenes only in times of elections as this, and most of the time they are corrupt organizations where they do not have a voice of accountability, and they could do more because others too are trying, and most of the times they are met with suppression. I would say that because you have civil societies that at some point want to ask for account, at some point deeply condemn social ills, at some point condemn the crackdown on dissent. But we know the consequence sometimes on it because we have systems that are most of this. We are living in countries like in Cameroon where the state is also the ruling power, where the ruling party is also the state, and it becomes in this political cacophony, it becomes difficult sometimes, and the state in itself, power is centralized, the military is owned by the state, the police is owned by the state. It becomes really difficult, and I would say the environment in which the civil societies are found, it's not really easy for them to operate. So in as much as we will want to lay blames on them for not projecting their voices enough, we also know the consequence that awaits those who sometimes would just want to speak for the masses, speak for the downtrodden. It becomes really difficult, and that is why beyond the civil society, I think the people en masse should be able to ask questions, should be able to crack down on dissent and hold the state accountable. And I'm really hoping that the future elections in Cameroon would come with a certain wind of change, because it's been for too long, and we've the current president has served his time, and posterity, history would judge him. It's not in our. I'm not going to make a balance sheet or a great mark of the current president. He's done his time, and at his age, I think the people should be able to understand that it's graceful at 93 to let him go and give a possibility of a breather, of a fresh air. However it is, let the chance for change, and let's see what will come.
Absolutely. We are ending with you, Arnaud DEVELAY, just 1 minute concluding phase on the way forward to be able to continue to make that positive trajectory for Africa's diplomatic standing, especially with its involvement with BRICS and other multilateral institutions. Okay, yeah, thank you so much. I think that intervention from EKANE actually brings us to the end of today's program, Global Insight, which will actually thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for the diverse insights which we had pertaining this topic for today. Is Africa trapped in global diplomacy, which actually highlighted the loopholes coming from the African continent, the loopholes coming from probably Africa's engagement with the Western world and other historical loopholes. But then, how can we navigate the space that we have in the present or contemporary society to make a win-win partnership, like we underlined in the preamble, that today we hear of a win-win partnership, which is now some sort of a mantra across the African continent, we also highlighted some of the benefits, the strides that the continent has made holistically and diplomatically, citing the case against Israel, which is under the auspices of the South African government. We cited the case where African leaders actually put their voices together to see how they can solve the Ukrainian crisis that had a global, probably has a global ramifications, and you can name the rest, while aligning with the theme for this year, the year of reparations under the African Union. I think with a strong political will coming from our political stakeholders and even the civil society, what more of African diaspora, we can maybe make a better trajectory for the continent Africa to discuss strategically and diplomatically. Thank you so much. It was indeed a compelling discussion without forgetting the technical crew for ensuring that it was actually smooth. Thank you so much. And of course, I thank you all for trusting this program, Global Insight. We'll come back to you subsequently for more compelling analysis to help widen our horizons. Bye-bye and have a lovely weekend.